Thank you so much for joining me. Today, I want to dig into employee personas, how we uncover them, and how understanding inherently diverse psyches can revolutionize our approach to company culture and cultivating an environment where every employee feels seen and valued for who they are and intrinsically motivated. I have the great pleasure of speaking with Lisa Prusak, an organizational psychologist, a powerhouse operations girl, and managing partner and CEO for Redstone Business Consulting Group in Houston, Texas. Welcome, Lisa.
Thanks, Nader. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. This topic is right up your alley. So tell me a little bit about your approach to employee engagement and well-being. What are some of the challenges you've seen in recent years, especially in our post-COVID hybrid remote work environment?
Right. So I think that's a great thing to unpack. And I think one of the things that we have to be mindful of is not just the engagement of employees, but the new normal, right? We're walking into a situation where you have 5 distinct eras, if you will, Gen Z, Gen X, baby boomers, all converging in the workforce, with different needs, different, values, different intrinsic motivators, and so on and so forth of what they've experienced, what they grew up with, what they're used to, and what they're hoping for. And then you had that prior to, COVID and hybrid work environments that were really taking hold and things. And then COVID accelerated all of those things, right? And how is that going to play into how middle management shows up and manages people? What leadership needs to be aware of? How companies can, still figure out what is needed to have a great culture? And then what does expansion and growth look like? And how do we value our talent, our people within our organizations so that they're not just a number, that we feel, a leadership team feels we can just exchange one for the other, right? I think before and after COVID, that idea of exchanging one for the other really creates a poor culture within an organization. Really understanding what each person brings to the table, what they come in with, are they matched to the job appropriately, and how can we have them develop deep roots within the organization with training and growth for them both personally and professionally? How can we do that, and how can we expand that again to the understanding of each of those Gen Z, Gen X, baby boomer, groups? So I think those are the things that we have to think about maybe and unpack today when we have a discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, you brought up a lot of points there. That was okay. So the generational separations, and then also work profiles and sort of fitting the right people to the right positions and right roles. How would you? So those are all connected. How would you? I guess. How would you prioritize, what you're looking at when you're trying to fill a certain role? I mean, where do the questions even begin? Are you coming from a place like finding the right fit, for example? Is the culture already defined, and do you sort of fit a person into the culture from a chemistry point of view, or is the culture being defined by the people filling the roles? What angle are you looking at that from? Does that make sense?
It does. It completely makes sense. And I want to preface everything by saying it's really important for an organization to have a good foundation. And what do we mean by foundation? Well, understanding what the roles and responsibilities truly are. We haven't gone out to Google or Chat GPT and said, "Oh, I need a job description for, a position," right? And something gets spit back to us, and okay, that's what we're going to do. We need to really understand what type of organization structure do we need to have? What roles do we need to have within each of the departments? And what tasks are those people really assigned to do, and the accountability piece? And then remember, I talked about the career ladder or the growth opportunities, right? So that's a starting point. Why is that a starting point? Because then I can truly look at how can I then create an assessment or a group of assessments that will speak to that job match. Because I want to bring somebody into the organization, right, that matches the role that I'm trying to fill. Okay. Not only in experience, but can they grow into the role, right? Not only in experience, but do they fit in a way that really speaks to them internally, right? That's really at the core of who they are. And how can we figure that out? And we utilize assessments. We call it the head, the heart, and the briefcase. So we can use behavioral assessments to determine the head part, right? The head space that we're in, not personality necessarily. I'd like to be really clear between the difference between a personality assessment and a behavioral assessment, because we don't really change personality. What we do is we change behavior with intrinsic and extrinsic reinforcement, right? And so let's be clear about those things because it's important. The heart is, do I want to be here? Do I have a passion for this? Can I see myself here? I really can't wait to get here and grow. And I've been so excited to be in XYZ industry. Okay, great. And then the briefcase piece, what experience am I bringing with me? Whether that's education, the combination of education and, I've held roles in, similar industries, the same industry. I'm good at generalizing these type of things. And I think when you combine those three things together and you match them up again to that really good defined role with a good set of responsibilities, now you have a conversation that's going somewhere.
Okay, that's really interesting. So you basically, in essence, you're, to put it simply, you're creating the role with a specific personality in mind, and then you're fitting the person based on this anatomy that you just described, the head, heart, and briefcase, that best fits into that pre-created role, that very
Pre-created
carefully
role that fits in with the organizational structure that when combined together, right, has the set of behaviors and roles and responsibilities with accountability, right, combined together that gets us to our business outcome.
Right.
Because this is the talent strategy piece we're talking about. So we have a business outcome that we'd like to achieve in the year, in 3 years, 5 years, et cetera, in the week.
Yeah.
Right. And each of the departments comes together to meet that business outcome through a series of strategies. And the strategy that you and I are talking about today is talent strategy, people strategy, right? And it's super important to not just, flip a coin and go, yeah, good enough.
Yeah.
Because then that's going to create a whole new set of problems and issues that you and I see a lot of times when we engage with our clients on a consultative basis, right? Issues and problems that they're having many times stem from that lack of good job fit and a real understanding about what roles are we trying to fill and why, and then what am I bringing to the table to achieve those business outcomes.
Right. So I love that. And you and I have talked about this in the past. This is, it's flipping. So typically companies, most companies are very focused on the customer experience, right? They're looking at customer value proposition, and even branding agencies like my own are primarily developing strategies for external facing customer experiences. This is basically taking that and flipping it inwards and creating a value proposition for the employee and for talent. And the way that you described the career path, milestones and so on is basically the same. Not basically, it's the same question that you would ask a customer when you're pitching a customer. But in this case, for example, when we do interviews, when I run interviews, I just ask the same question. It's a reverse, it's 3 years from now, we're hanging out, like we're having a coffee. You're very happy with what's gone on within the last 3 years. What's happened in the last 3 years to make you happy? And that could be, the mountaintop, whatever you want it to be. And then we work backwards from there, developing your career path in the moment. So like we can even per the job description that you described, we could even potentially scope out the next, 3, 6, and 12 months of your job here right on the
Yes.
spot. So you get like this
Yes.
immediate buy-in from the candidate because they're already envisioning this growth path in front of them, which is it's a very different way of it's a completely different sort of outcome rather than having the conversation of like, what can you do for us? It's a what can
Yes.
I do for you? What can we do for you? And how can we get you to the place that you want to be so that there's this mutual sort of back and forth to get to collectively get you to where you want to be so that we can ultimately get where we want to be.
Right.
Right. That's
shared value proposition.
yeah, I love
Right.
that. So in the case
Yes.
of like identifying these personas, for example, not for example, these personas like you described, how would you suggest that organizations or leaders like effectively conduct primary qualitative research? What methods do you think are useful? What do you use yourself when gathering these kinds of insights about employee motivations, values, and work styles, and so on?
Right. Again, let's start with making sure that we understand roles and responsibilities, right? What are we trying to achieve and why?
Right.
And our leadership styles, being very aware of our leadership styles. So there are assessment tools, many that are out there, many that are very valid and reliable and good. And so pick one of those, right? I use Predictive Index and AG Win sites as examples of two of them. There are others. And really assess, right? Leadership first, have the leaders be very aware of the styles that they have, the way that they communicate, the way that they make decisions, the way that they handle conflicts, and the way that they show up together as a leadership team if there's more than one, and how they're, showing up and what's important to them, because we're going to use that as messaging next, right? And so then we can then understand, okay, and what type of organization do we have? Are we in a really fast growth? Are we scaling and growing very quickly? Are we at a point where we've done that and now we need to document what we're doing, right? So then that also predicts who we need on the team next and how can we balance out all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So based upon where we are in our journey as an organization, it's also going to be important that we fill in the roles strategically, right? Of who do we hire next? Who are our next hires? And how do we then assess them, from a behavioral standpoint on how they're going to be a good fit for what the organization needs moving forward or moving in this phase of whatever the phase of the business is in, matching the job, again, the role with the person. Okay. And then conducting really good interviews to identify that good fit. And then, like we talked about, having that career conversation, and then continuing to make sure that we're having those conversations at a good, clip. Are we doing it once a week? Are we doing a check-in? Are we doing it once a month, every 6 months? But what's the expectation? Be very clear about that. Okay. And then I like to have, as a leader, I like to have conversations when I'm doing an interview with someone where I literally say, it's really important to us from a leadership and an organizational perspective that you are really excited about working here. You found out about the company. You understand, our vision, our mission, our purpose. You really want to be here because we want you to want to be here. We want you to want to grow yourself as we grow the organization. And as we change and evolve, we want you to come along with us. What we don't want to do, and I say this very directly, what we don't want to do is have you come on board and then leave in 3 months or 6 months. That doesn't benefit you and your career, journey. And that certainly doesn't benefit our organization. It's very costly,
right,
if we don't make a good match between one another. So I think educating leaders and hiring managers on how to have those really good, transparent conversations and just be honest. Like, we would like for you to land and expand with us.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want a revolving door. And I think that also speaks to our culture, because culture, that piece of the culture is an awareness of how important each of those people in our organization are to the success of our organization. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I do have a follow-up in the form of the interviews. As a psychologist, as an organizational psychologist, in designing basically the psychography behind different personas, different personality types. Each we know that different roles require different personalities. If you're a big
That's correct.
company, especially if you're a big company, let's say you have 10 departments. You have the IT department, you have operations, you have marketing, you have sales, you have accounting, and so on. Those people are very different from each other. Marketing is generally extroverted people who are creative and whatever. Sales is like all out extroversion, and then IT is introverted and so on. So these personalities require they require parameters. Like, you have to understand who these people are, so they're going to be the best fit in that role. And then if you're a manager of like IT and a manager of marketing, you have to have some sort of overlap, because you're going to be communicating interdepartmentally. And again, like flipping from the customer side, it's still you're segmenting these different personalities as like target talents, for lack of a better word. And
Yes.
so in your interview methodologies, again, as an organizational psychologist, how do you narrow that down to be able to fit a specific sort of psychographic profile, if that makes sense?
Yes. So there are several assessment tools, predictive index being one of them, which is very well known for taking the guesswork out of that job match, because you create a job target from your job description. And within the system, so there's a platform, a system that has 60 years of really good metrics and data behind it, all these algorithms, if you will, okay, psychometric data, okay. And we say, okay, we're gonna say this is the role that we're trying to fill, and then it does an algorithm, and we get to look at it too. So from an organizational psychologist perspective, or we train the hiring managers or the HR department that's utilizing the tool, okay, to understand, does this make sense? So when the job target is created, what it's looking at is, how social the person is, how formal or informal they need things to happen. In other words, there are some people that if you put, I like to call it the red tape, some of it's necessary, right? Meaning processes, procedures, this type of thing. But there are people who thrive in that environment, and there are people that run away from that. Okay. And based on that, it's going to predict what roles they're going to be better at than others, right? So we take these 4 dynamics. Those are 2. The other ones are pace, right? The patience or the pace with which I'm operating, and how much control I need to have over the people and events, right? So those are the, from a predictive index standpoint. And all the assessments are very similar, but we'll just talk about one. It makes it easier for, to have this conversation. Then based on that, right, we get a profile of the person in I call it their natural environment. They're floating in the deep end of the pool with their floaty and their beverage of choice, and they're all relaxed, and they're just themselves. Okay. And that's one of the pieces of the assessment. The second piece is, oh no, now I'm in front of people. And in this case, I'm in front of people at work, in a work environment. Have I modified, the way that I show up in those 2 environments? Did my assessment, is it one right on top of the other and exactly the same? Some people do. Some people are right smack on, right. Each of the things measures that way. Some people, their drives, their needs and drives move around based on, now I've shown up at work. We can extrapolate that to somebody who is in a ownership position or a leadership position, might have that need for control, move more to the right, increasing the need to have control on people and events. Because they're saying, oh, I realize I have to show up that way.
Right.
right? And so it's an awareness piece that we're building, right? To look at what does that look like for the person. Okay. So when I make the job match and you've gone through the interview process where you've gone through some of the gates, right? You've had, we have the, what I say, the go, no go, right? Do you have this much experience? Have you, all those, like, the must-haves. Okay. So you've passed those gates. You've passed the initial screening. You've probably had a phone conversation. You're put to the next. Now you're in the assessment phase, because we don't want to assess people if they don't pass the first gates, because that's expensive.
So are you
right?
running the predictive index? Because I know it's like a question, it's like a survey kind of a thing, right? And
It is.
are you
Yes.
running those during the interview? Like, do you have
So you're
candidates
going to
actually?
do that before, right? So what my recommended process would be to have those non-negotiables for the role that you're trying to fill. Okay. The gates, if you will. You want people to pass through certain gates. So you're going to have those non-negotiables you have to have for the role. Then you pass that gate. Then you might have a phone screening interview and you pass that gate, right?
Got
There's
it.
certain criteria. Once you do that, my recommendation is to go ahead and take the assessment. The assessment comes back, you look at it. How much of a fit on the surface is the person? This is where a good consultant comes in, right? Because then we'll show you how to read this. We show you what it means. Now, this again is only one of the three pieces that I talked about at the beginning. This is the head piece, right? So, okay, so what type of fit are we? Okay, and if there's any misalignment in the fit, let's look at where the misalignment comes in.
Do you have an example of this? Do you have a story you can share?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I would love to hear that.
Okay. So let me finish where the misalignment comes in. You're going to look at that, and then you're going to determine, okay, can I ask a set of specific questions that will help me to feel better about, well, that's not the most important piece that I need to look at, because I need to understand the heart and the briefcase piece to get the big picture. Okay. So that's the answer to your first question. And then an example of this would be, this is a really good example. So when we had the nonprofit that we had to provide supports and services to families of children and adults with disabilities. We grew the organization very, very quickly, not because we wanted to make money, but because we wanted to make sure that the families had the services that they needed. So we went from 2 service lines to 18 service lines and about $650,000 operating budget to $7 million in 2.5 years.
Wow.
So the growth and the expansion of the organization was off the chart.
Wow.
It was basically like that. It wasn't a gradual, And so based on that, industry standards for turnover, one of the things that we're concerned with as an organization, costs us a lot of money. Industry standards of turnover for direct care staff and this type of thing for, job training and supported employment and day programming and all those residential and all those things was about 27%. Well, at one point in time, we were getting up to 52, 54% turnover, which was costing the organization a lot of money. It was upsetting the clients and their families that we had, because there's a lot of people with autism, and that's a lot of change, and and it was expensive. And so I went to a board member who was just absolutely genius, and I learned so much from him. And in fact, he was on the team of people who picked the astronauts that were going to go to the moon based on all the things we're talking about.
Wow. Okay.
And so he came and I went to him and I said, oh my gosh, we have this issue and it's really bad. And he said, okay, here's what we're going to do. Bring all your managers from all the different departments and some, key staff, and meet me in the conference room for a day on a day. And I said, okay. And he said, now here's what we're going to do, y'all. He said, everybody get a piece of paper out, but don't show it to the other people, and write down. Now we have, around 200 staff members. Okay. Of all the different levels and places and all the things. Write down the 10 people that you believe are your top people. If you could clone those 10 people, who are they? So everybody, wrote down, no talking, no talking. We wrote it all down. And then everybody got to say who their list was, and then we wrote it up on the board. And do you know, within 12 people, we all wrote down the same people.
Wow. That's amazing. Like identical?
Out of 200 people.
Name for name, identical?
Name for name, minus with the addition of those
That's
two
crazy.
extra.
That's amazing.
Right? Mm-hmm. He said, okay, you guys are pretty adept at figuring out. Now, I do like to point out that many of us were behavior specialists. So we did pay a little bit more attention than the average bear, right? Because what we did working with children and adults with autism and, behaviors and so on, you pay attention a little bit more to behaviors of everyone, right? Okay. And so now we have a list of 10, 12 people. Okay. And we got it down. We had the 10. And so then he said, now we're going to use an assessment tool, very similar to what we've been talking about. Okay. Yeah. We're going to use this assessment tool. We're going to give them the assessment. We're going to see what comes back. Okay, great. What came back was an avatar, if you will, where I could almost lay one on top of the other to the point where they were so similar that now I had a target, okay, with which to hire the next group of people for direct care. We're talking about direct care staff. Sure. Okay. Now I've got a job target, right? It was like, wow, this is really cool. This was back in 2002.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now I have this. Okay, great. And now we also, the other thing that we did was we created a set of questions for each of those gates that I was telling you about. I mean, for one thing, they all had to be able to pass a background check, because if you work with a population that is vulnerable, people with disabilities, the elderly, children, you have to pass a background check. That's just non-negotiable. That's not even my thing. That's a state thing. So once you passed, certain gates, and we created those phone screening conversations and so on, then we created a set of identical questions and taught the hiring managers how to ask the questions and how to score them.
Okay.
And then we did a lot of training about that, right? So that we got to the point where they were scoring things within, 1 point of the other. So we, took that off the table as somebody was going to give a 5 and the other giving a 1. No, we got them down to where they were very close. Okay, good enough. Taught them how to do that. And then started the hiring process over again. And within 6 to 8 weeks, we had gone from 52 or 54% turnover down to 17%. Wow. Okay. I mean, yeah. And stayed between 15 and 17% the whole time until 2010 when I left at the end. I'm not really sure what happened after that. But while I was there, we stayed. So well below, if you remember what I told you, well below the 27% industry standard.
Yeah.
And
well below. There. Yeah.
Well below. Yeah. And why was this important? Well, because the state required us to give 10 hours of training. We had 60 hours of training that we gave someone. And they had, and at the end had to be signed off on the lead of whatever group, or they got more training.
Yeah.
And and I know training is expensive if you have a revolving door.
Yeah.
But training is valuable to an organization, like we talked about, where we want people to come in and land and expand and grow within the organization and feel good about being there.
Absolutely.
So let's take this story one more step, where we're going to now talk about culture and that career ladder. Because what we believed was we want people to come in at this level, land and expand, and personally and professionally grow. We developed a way to have a direct care staff person be able to land and expand and grow and learn from, let's say, a board certified behavior analyst in this case, and be able to become a great behavior specialist having nothing more than a GED.
Wow. Yeah.
and be proud of themselves and grow and learn and develop into managers, leads, and so on. Now you've got a culture of people that want to be there, have a passion for it, have a belief, have good training, have a good development path, have good benefits. Now you're off to the races because now you've got an organization that can now speak into and lean into the purpose of why we're here.
Yeah.
Which is to make sure that people with disabilities and their families have the lives that they want to have and the choices that they want to have. And now we've created an organization where we can make it happen. And you don't have people changing because it bothers them when there's a lot of change. Like it bothers all of us, but on crack,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Now we've created an organization within the community that's really making a difference. And that's how what we're talking about happens. Okay. And that's why it's important, because now every organization that's created for the purpose and the mission and the vision and whatever, right, gets to be who they want to be and isn't distracted by wrong fit, bad culture, not good leadership, right? And they get to be who they want to be and everyone benefits.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's why it's important.
That's so amazing. Man, you dropped down to 17%. That's just phenomenal. And
15 to 17.
Yeah.
15 to 17.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And you said, I always say like good design is never noticed. Bad design is felt. You can ask somebody like why something is great and they'll usually talk about a couple feelings, but like they can't really tell you why it's great. But if you ask somebody why something sucks, they'll have an endless list of specific.
A list of, and they're probably not wrong.
Yeah.
That's the thing. They're probably not wrong.
It's actually the best way to. Sorry, go ahead.
The other thing that was super important to your point is when you went and you asked an employee, right? Do you feel valued within the organization? And do you feel, like your purpose is just beyond you? And the message that they got from the leadership and the board and everything was, okay, yeah, we have founders and whatever. And, they go out and they collect the checks and they get to speak for everyone. But we wouldn't be who we are without all of you. It's not about the board. It's not about the founder. It's about the collective. And we got to a point where they were the ones that were giving the tours. They were the ones that were speaking. They were the ones that were out front. And they really were so strong in their belief as to why they were important and what difference they were making that leadership didn't have to say anything anymore. It was everyone else. And when you can get an organization where everyone else is speaking of why they're important and what their role means and so on, no matter what it is, okay, there you go.
Yeah. And now you have inherent advocates, right? I'm assuming the employer, the company's reputation probably skyrocketed because of that.
Yes. And now guess where your next employee is coming from? Word of mouth from the people that work there. They're bringing good people. And I'll tell you what they're not doing. They're not bringing people that are not good. They're not just bringing anyone. They're assessing whether, well, I know so-and-so needs a job and everything, and they've done it before. They're not going to be a good fit for us. And they're saying it themselves. Yeah. They don't bring them. They don't recommend them. And they're having that conversation with themselves or with their peer group. Well, yeah, they're okay, but do we really want them here? Yeah. That was a screening that happened well before we got there, well before it got to us, right? Or well before it got to that first, those first gates. And that was super interesting. And so that happens in all organizations when it's working like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And whether it's negative or positive, I mean, it impacts the quality of somebody's life overall. I mean, you're impacting, whether they're individuals or they have a family or they have children or whatever. I mean, speaking of age, generation gaps or differences in generations, I learned something recently that kind of changed my perspective about that whole thing. Is like the generation gap is something to take into account, but more than that, it's
Yes.
specifically lifestyle, because you could be of different generations and have the same lifestyle. You could be,
Yes.
a younger mid 20s something, a single man, and a the with excuse me, a 36-year-old or 48-year-old single man, and essentially maybe you're isolated, you don't have a lot of friends or something, or you don't have a big social life, so like your work is basically the place that you go to interact with others and um, have that sort of interaction with other people and get that fulfillment in that case. But then you might be, a 28-year-old new father with two kids, and like the 26-year-old and you have nothing to do with each other. Like you have more in common with an older, parent or whatever. And so like
Yes.
how do those when you take into account these cultural initiatives in employee engagement and employee well-being, how let's say, how much emphasis are you placing on lifestyle, like outside of the workplace, and
Mhm.
understanding that whatever happens here is impacting that and vice versa, and like their lifestyle, especially in the remote environment, their lifestyle is going to impact how engaged they are with the workplace, like how meetings are affecting them, if it's affecting them, whether they're go-getters or they sort of
Mhm.
need the both emotional and hand-holding support or
Mhm.
whatever. How do you take into how much emphasis do you place on actual lifestyle outside of the workplace, and how does that affect the way that you not only hire people but continue to work with them and train them and allow them to grow?
Mhm. So, big word, right? Culture,
Hmm.
right? So let's know that that's the realm in which we are speaking. Okay. And it's a lot to unpack because it has a lot. You asked a lot of questions, but culture is what we're
Hmm.
talking about. Uh, One, I want to say that from it, again, leadership is very important. Messaging is very important, but awareness is the key to this whole thing. So, one, as a leader, my thought process is, and I verbalize this a lot to people, we spend the most time with each other at the workplace. Well, I mean, hybrid, now it's a little
Yeah,
different,
sure.
right? But in general, let's just speak in generalities. We are spending 8 to 10 hours a day with our work family.
Yeah.
From that standpoint, I always say to my team, I want you to be excited to drive here. I want you to be excited. Think about this. And I guess we'll just leave hybrid out for a minute. I want you to be excited about getting in your car, dropping your children off at school or wherever, getting into traffic in the case of, being in Houston, we all know what that's like. And really the whole time thinking about, I'm excited to have this conversation. I'm excited to be on this, project. I'm excited to go to this thing. I want to get to work. I want to see my friends, my colleagues, right? Want to have those good conversations. I feel like, every day is an adventure and I'm really happy that I'm going. That doesn't mean there's not stress and pressure
Hmm.
and all of that. But at the end of the day, that's, where's the balance? Am I having all these good emotions while I'm driving in this crazy traffic and I got to go back and drive home in the crazy traffic, right? Am I looking forward to doing that? And as a leader, what I'm hoping that everybody does is understands that and creates an environment where that is mostly true,
Right.
right? It's utopian. I get it. I'm not trying to be Pollyanna, but let's try to make a situation where that's mostly true, right? It's important. Okay. Then the awareness of how I'm showing up as a leader and what my personality and my behaviors are and so on versus the others, right? Just the awareness, how I need to be communicated with and what's important to each group of people that I'm dealing with and how they need to be communicated with. And those assessment tools are going to tell us that,
Yeah.
right? Which is why
Right.
they're helpful, right? So that's good. And if we don't have an assessment tool, we kind of can see people's behavior if we pay attention. So pay attention, right? Pay attention. Some people are quiet, some people like to speak and, everywhere in between. So we notice those things. So that's one piece. Okay. The other piece that you asked about is the intrinsic motivation of someone versus the extrinsic motivation of someone. So again, environment, that's extrinsic, right? The environment, the paycheck, the benefits, the bonuses, all of those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we can create an environment where we understand what each generation, what's important to each generation and why. Okay. And we can build that into our culture and to our talking points. Okay. Our career ladders, like we talked about, personal and professional growth and everything. That's important. And then the question that you also asked speaks into work-life balance, and how that relates to each of those generations and what's important to them and why. Okay. And now you've got a generational situation, 5 generations in the workplace, and work-life balance isn't the same to everyone.
Sure. Yeah.
Here's an interesting fact. Perceived organizational support is a construct that was developed in 1979, around there, is the same to everyone. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. We can get a pretty good work-life balance culture going and hit, can we make everybody happy all of the time? No, but we can kind of converge on something that's good for everyone. But here's the key. Perceived organizational support is the same for everyone, no matter the age and the generation. And if we have high levels of perceived organizational support, it's a survey. Okay, so now we're back to our psychometric conversation. If we get high levels of that for all the groups, okay, all the people within the organization, guess what happens? We have high levels of engagement and commitment and success, which predicts intentions to stay in the organization, less turnover, and more effectiveness and efficiency and success for the individual, the small group, and the organization. So while work-life balance was really your question, which is a different construct to each of those generations, perceived organizational support wraps it all up and hands it back to you and says, if you have a high perceived organizational support within your organization, 35 questions in a survey, it's a predictor, very valid and reliable predictor of engagement, commitment, intentions to stay, success for person and organization.
And now you're a culture brand. That's how you impact your community or the world around you and people's lifestyles as a result.
Exactly. And so if I'm happy, engaged, and committed at work, what am I going to be? I'm going to be a better customer service person.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Right? In whatever capacity that I am. Okay, let's take manufacturing something. If I have that and I'm satisfied at work, I'm going to pay attention more to the quality, right? I'm going to dig in and make it a high, I'm not going to,
because you care,
just kind of be okay with the status quo. I'm going to try to make that quality be quality all the time, right? Even though I'm not speaking to a customer, that speaks to the customer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you care. And it, like you said, even though you're not directly speaking to the customer, you know what your role is in the entire chain of events. And you have ownership. You've been given ownership. You've been given ownership to make decisions, to feel valued, to feel seen. This is the essence of brand equity. If you want to build your brand equity as a company in the market and be seen as, a great place to be. I mean, what is brand strategy and branding in essence all about? It's about making a place or an organization so attractive that everybody wants a piece of it, whether they're doing business with them or whether they want to work with them, or if you're a town, that people want to come live there or whatever. It's like from every possible angle, your brand equity is thriving because people want to work with you. They want to grow with you. They want to be a part of your world because they feel supported. They feel seen. They feel heard. They feel like They can,
Cared
they
about.
feel cared about, and it goes beyond the individual. What you said earlier, it becomes about the collective, this collective
Yeah.
purpose, right? Like it's something beyond myself. It's not about me anymore. It's not about you. It's about us and everyone around us. And that to me, I'm getting goosebumps right now, because that to me is what makes what we do so special. Like if you can actually tap into that holistic, this is when that word holistic really means something.
Yes.
That holistic approach where you're coming from, our model, it's the inside outside in model. That's why we call it that.
That's
because
exactly
it's
right.
you're
Yep.
going in, back out, and then back in, and they're developing this completely holistic brand strategy that speaks to the customer experience, the employee experience, the leadership experience, just the entire organization as a whole, which ultimately impacts the literal community, whether it's physical in a physical place in a location or online, digital, it doesn't matter. Anyone who interacts with this place is improving their lives in some way, shape, or form. And that in itself is so special. And this is when, you and I argue about like how leadership just needs to get on the ball, because they're not seeing past the end of their own noses with respect to like what it means to have to care about your employees' well-being, and to really understand that they are the anatomy of your company. To push your three-pronged approach further, they're your heart, your brain, and your muscles. I mean, if you don't have satisfied, well driven employees, motivated for their own reasons, trained for their own reasons, not for your reasons, for their reasons.
A shared reason. So it and again, it has
Thank
to
you
be
for saying that.
a shared reason, right? It's good for them. It's good for the organization. It's good for everyone, right? It benefits people when we can match people to their passions.
Yeah,
that's the heart piece.
Exactly.
Right, with their ability, their behavioral, floating around in the pool versus how I have to show up to work, right? And the experience. And you can say, here's the other interesting thing: high levels of conscientiousness and moderate to high level intelligence. And we're talking innate intelligence. We're not talking about, did you get a PhD from school?
Yeah,
we're just talking about your innate intelligence. So high levels of conscientiousness, right, which is a personality trait that does not change, and high levels of moderate to high levels of intelligence, predict, again, we're talking about prediction, that's going to be a good employee. And I can pretty much teach you anything. So to me, maybe it doesn't matter that you don't come in with a big briefcase, but you come in with the passion, and you come in with that, you're conscientious and you're pretty intelligent. That's a great person to choose, because I'm going to be able to teach you anything that you want to learn, because you want to learn it.
Exactly.
Right. And then I have to figure out your learning style. Okay. And yet at the end of the day, I get to teach you some really cool stuff. And again, now you're growing in this. Go back to my example, which is what we did, is now they were able to grow within the organization, and really, like, they never imagined that they would manage anything. Now they're a manager. Boy, can I tell you how much ownership did they take about that?
I know. I believe you. I always go for I always lean into chemistry and desire more than skill. I like, for the exact same reasons you just listed. Like, I basically go, if we fit, if you value what we value, and we can get you to where you want to be, then this will work. There's no reason that it shouldn't. But if you just like fit the skill level, the extrinsic, motivators of this job, then it's only going to last so long. Like, you're basically here for a paycheck, and that's not going to work.
Well, you're talking about checking a box of experience minus the head and the heart.
That's right. You just got the briefcase.
So
That's not enough.
no, it isn't, because you don't have the passion for it. It's like you don't have the purpose, the drive, and all of those things, And hey, guess what? A paycheck is important, right? I mean,
of course.
Right? That is
Yeah,
important to people. That's important. But you know what? I'm going to say this. I don't want somebody to choose to be at a job because they have to be there. Although, listen, we all have to have a paycheck and all that. I'm not knocking that. But I wouldn't want somebody to choose this job over this job, just because.
Oh, I agree.
Right?
And the high of a raise, the high of a promotion lasts about 3 months. And then you realize that you're still in the same place, you're with the same people, you have less time to enjoy your raise because you have more responsibilities at work, and nothing has changed in your immediate environment, and you're not driven by anything other than that high that you got when you got that promotion, with a promise that if you continue busting your ass, you might get another promotion in another 9 months. And
9 months, I think people would be like, wow, am I going to get a promotion in 9 months? It could take years, right?
Yeah.
And here's the other thing too. A promotion isn't a promotion either.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of times, who becomes the manager? The person that's been there the longest. Right? Is that the best person to choose for a manager role? Probably not.
Not necessarily.
Right?
Yeah.
So again, we go back to your question of job matching and psychometrics, right? And so now, in our career ladder, so now the suggestion, humbly, is make a career ladder where you do have a management track, but you do assess people as to their fit for management from the behavioral standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Is that important to them? Do they have the characteristics to be a manager?
Yeah.
Or are they a great subject matter expert and they have all the characteristics of being a really good trainer, which has nothing to do with being a manager? And my argument is, have a track, a management track and a subject matter expert track, where they get to be elevated within the organization and rewarded for the behaviors that we want to see and their subject matter expertise, but we're not forcing them to be a manager in order to go to the next level.
Yeah, that's smart.
So let's reward the behavior we want to see, how we want to see it. But again, let's build awareness within our leadership to understand the difference.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can touch on those right from the get-go within the interview, set the expectations, and then with proper frequent check-ins and training and monitoring and feedback loops, there's no reason that it can't get there. And I agree. It's
Absolutely
just,
not.
We need to just inspire, motivate, and bring awareness to leaders to just get it going. Just look inwards. You have to look inwards. Without that inside anatomy, it's just, you don't go very far. And
here's your soundbite: do better to be better.
Do better to be better. Lisa, thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been really fun. I learned a lot. You and I talk often, but I always learn from you. And it was a pleasure having you on. Is there any thing you want to leave us with? And also, please tell us how we can get in touch with you if we want to reach you.
Sure. So Lisa at Redstone, B as in boy, C as in Charlie, G as in good, redstonebusinessconsultinggroup.com is my email. Happy to have you reach out there, or on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile is up. Please feel free to stalk me on LinkedIn. Not really, but you can find out all about me and all the organizations that I'm supporting, and all my friends like Nader. And we have an organization together called Synergy that they can also find on LinkedIn, and reach out to both of us to hear more about how we can help them to do the things that we've been talking about. And again, do better to be better, I think, is the final, right?
Yes, do better to be better. Lisa, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks. Thank you.
Take care.